Well, we're actually three after. You wanna jump into this, Kevin?
Let's do it. Let's have some fun. One of our favorite topics to present on.
Yeah. Kevin and I have presented on this topic a few times, and it's one that we always run out of time for the slides that we prepared. So if we go a little fast, I'm sorry because we only scheduled this for an hour. But everybody, thanks for joining. If you haven't, it's your first time joining, I'm Chris. I'm the Microsoft Practice Director here at A&M, and I've got Kevin on with me as well. He is the Director for Partner Technology Architects at Microsoft. Kevin and I have been doing this for, 2 years now? We've been having a lot of fun doing these monthly webinars, talking today around Microsoft security, and you can see I put a little play on that. There's a defender for that because there's a lot of defenders, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. We got the chat going, so if there's questions, please put them in the chat. We'll get to them throughout the meeting. I do have some polls loaded as well, so you might see those pop up on the screen a little bit after we get started as well. At the very end, I want to go ahead and prompt you for a poll because I want you to think about it. Is make sure that I want to make sure that we're talking about things that you guys are interested in. So I'm going to ask later on, what future topics do you want us to talk about? So think about that and put that in the poll later, because if the content's not relevant for you guys, then you're not going to attend, and then why are we doing this? So Kevin and I want to make sure that it's information that you want to hear about. So with that, Kevin, that's enough for intros, right? So we are recording it, and Amy will send out the recording 24 48 hours. Amy, I think that's when you normally get it. She sends it out pretty quick. She's good about it. So that'll be out there as well. All right, so you ready, Kevin? You want to jump in?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's have some fun. See how far we get through our 33 slides here today.
Right. So the threats today, I mean, if you think about when people started really being concerned, threats only came in really through email, but we don't work just in email anymore. We work in so many different ways. So threats are coming at a lot of different directions. Email's still really high up there, but collaboration threats, meaning like when Kevin and I do anything, we don't email a presentation. We collaborate over Teams, we collaborate over OneDrive. So there's a lot of different apps that we collaborate with. I mean, when we were creating this PowerPoint, I just shared this PowerPoint with Kevin and we just started working on it. So if Kevin happened to have been compromised, that's how it could have gotten to me as well, because he could have embedded something into the PowerPoint. Collaboration threat. Shadow IT. Kevin, I know you and I have done many conversations about this. Do you want to take that one?
No, Shadow IT, that's a fun topic. Chris, we've been doing this one for years, right? And the question always comes up, what is Shadow IT? Well, simply put, it's all of the applications and services running on your network that your user environment installs that IT has no awareness of. So think about, the latest app in the Windows App Store, or just a downloadable application that someone says, oh my gosh, this looks like it could solve our problems and make our lives easier. And the best part is it's free. Let's download it and install it to all of my HR friends. And let's start sharing information through it. HR information, salary information, social security numbers, addresses, very, very personal information. Well, while it seems harmless enough, you always have to wonder about where is that data stored? How is it encrypted? Who's using it on the back end? Because free is never really free, right? But most importantly, and as Chris and I will talk about, how do you identify that? How do you identify what's really going on in your environment? And there's a lot of Microsoft 365 services that you can light up that will very quickly tell you how things are being used in your environment through several different ways that we'll talk about.
Yeah, and so that's one of our favorite topics. I mean, Kevin and I, like I said before, we talk about that a lot. But another one is everybody still wants to get to the endpoints. That's what everybody that is in this threat world today, the bad actors, what they want is they want access to your endpoints. So those threats are becoming just, clicking on links. Then they get into your endpoints. So maybe there's that. And the new one that, it's not new to me, but it's coming out more in the industry, is misconfiguration. So people think that they have themselves set up correctly. They think that, hey, we're using best of breed protection, but they're just using it out of the box. And so they're not actually using the tools that they have correctly. So they're just thinking that they've got that toolbox and that hammer's on top, and they're just going to hit everything with that hammer. And that's a misconfiguration. So that's actually it's been moving up the list for years, but that's a big threat nowadays, Kevin.
Yep. With over 100 different features in some of the licensing sets from Microsoft 365, just because you apply a license does not mean that you have it. Does not mean
Yeah.
that it's configured correctly. And we'll highlight a big one here in just the next couple slides.
Yeah, you're right. So before we get there, let's talk about let's go back. How did we get there? Like, so when it first came out, Microsoft wasn't strong in the security space. So let's talk about how it's started and then where it's gotten. So, Kevin, you want to start this off with how the Defender for the endpoint, and then I can wrap it up with ATP.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been doing this for a long time. Microsoft has been in the security space for a long time. Now, granted, we haven't been very good at it up until just the past couple of years, where we've exceeded everyone, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes again. But back in 2005, we started out with the purchase of a product called anti-spyware. By a company called Giant, and that's where we really first started to get serious. Now, this is back in the Windows 2000, the XP days, Server 2003, and so on and so forth. But we've been at this for a while, right? And then we changed the name of these products over the years as things started to get better through XP and Vista and Windows 7 and Windows 8. We're going way back in time now. But then, then we started getting into online protection, right? It used to be with Exchange email servers that email would go right into your Exchange environment on premises, right? And there was no scanning except for at the Exchange server level. We got into that. But then we started to get into, okay, let's put something in front of Exchange. Let's go online and have SMTP records and MX records point to the online services that Microsoft has. And we'd scan email, and only the clean email would then go down to your on-premises Exchange server. And then we start getting into Exchange Online, right? And advanced threat protection that's out there. And we'll talk about that again in a few minutes. But advanced threat protection is all about stopping the email and even executing attachments in the cloud before it comes into your environment, before it lands now into your Exchange Online and your Outlook accounts. And using the power of Microsoft security services throughout the world, that we'll talk about some numbers shortly, and using those to your advantage. An attack on one service is an attack on all services, and being able to use that and protect everyone out there, the paying customers as well as the non-paying customers. And finally, there's Microsoft Defender for Office. That's the latest evolution that's out there. And again, this has been going on for, the past 20 years now. And again, the past 5 or 6 years, it's really changed. And there's over 100 different products out there that are included in Microsoft 365.
Yeah, so talking about Defender for Office 365, when I was doing a little bit of research to grab some numbers for this, so it actually started from FrontBridge when Microsoft acquired FrontBridge back in 2005. So when you said 20, you were spot on it. I mean, it's been about 20 years ago, and they did that. But I also read, and I didn't realize that it was this long ago, but 4 years ago in May of 2020, that's when Microsoft rebranded everything, so to speak, to the Defender product, or Microsoft Defender. So it feels like so long ago, but it's also not that long ago when everything started coming together under that Microsoft Defender umbrella, because they had all the different products and they were all named something different. And it was a good strategy, in my opinion, to pull everything underneath this Defender umbrella. And now when they start investing, which Microsoft is continuously investing, I forget the last number you told me, Kevin, but the amount of dollars that you guys are investing in just the Defender, the security products alone, it's a massive number.
Yeah, I think it was something like $20 billion over a 5-year period is what we were after, and that number was probably a year ago the last time I heard it. But as a result, the protection just gets better and better. The scope of the products gets better and better, but also the configuration and the complexity increases as well. And if your business is not focused on, if you're just out there to run your business, how do you know how to configure all these different services? How are you even aware of all of these? And what Chris and I are just going through is just a snippet of some of our favorite tools that are out there today in the whole suite. But that's where someone like Chris and his team comes in and really helps customers and focuses on the art of what's possible with cybersecurity and Microsoft. And also, we are talking about Microsoft security services here, but there are a lot of really good security vendors and products out there. Nothing says you have to go all the way with Microsoft. It's Microsoft or bust, right? As long
No.
as you're hitting all of the right areas to make your environment secure, we want to keep that in mind too, and we want to make sure that awareness is out there.
Yeah, no, a good call out on that. It is considered by a lot of the different studies out there to be of the best of breed, but there's some really good products out there too, and we're not saying that one is better than the other. This is more about educating people on what's available to them. And a lot of these things that we're going to be talking about through this presentation, they might already be licensed for it too. So I mean, in fact, if you have the E5 suite, which is the the Cadillac suite, so to speak, everything we're talking about today, you have access to. So just start using them. And if you have E3, two of them you'll actually have access as well too. But you mentioned the multitude of defenders. So I looked up, this was funny. I was like, how many defenders actually are there, Kevin? Because I was trying to, when I created this webinar, it's like, there's a defender for that. I was just kind of being joking. And then I was like, let's put it into Copilot and let's see what Copilot says. And I'm glad I recorded it when I did it, because it was an answer that was kind of bigger than I thought. So the next slide is going to be the recording of me asking Copilot, how many defenders are there in the Microsoft ecosystem? Yeah, here we go.
I love Copilot. Oh, you even put music behind it. Nice.
I tried. Got to use the tools, right?
And it's still going. And this is
exactly.
You recorded this real time. You didn't speed it up, slow it down, or anything. Yeah, nope. It's still going. I love this.
Yeah,
that's a great demo.
If you look at, like I said, I was just doing the research for this webinar, like I always do, and we've gotten conversations in the past. Did Copilot create this slide deck? So now we can actually say Copilot participated in our slide deck, Kevin. So that was another kind of play that I did there. But look at that. I mean, 20 that it just came up with, that it numbers out. And of the bottom one, right, there's a few other ones that are listed in there as well. So 20 plus Defender products that are out there today. That's a lot. So when you say Microsoft Defender, it can mean a multitude of different things. So Kevin, I know that we only have 45 more minutes. So
let's go.
Let's just talk about our favorites. And I want to start out with Defender for Office 365, because we alluded to it. It started out with FrontBridge. It went into on-prem, then it went into ATP, and now it's Defender for Office 365. So it's one of my favorite products to talk about, because it's native, right? It's native to Office 365, so you don't need to have that extra hot point for mail to go through. If you're going to use this for mail protection, you don't have to have that extra hot point, right? It's staying inside where your mail is. And because what Microsoft is doing, if you're not aware, with all the security Copilot that they're doing, all the AI and the automation that they're developing and putting into the tool sets is amplifying what all it can do. And Kevin talked earlier about the comprehensive approach, and I like this portion of this slide, because what I always talk about is, if you see a threat somewhere inside any of the Microsoft Defender type products, there's threat signals, there's sequences, there's a lot of algorithms and machine language that your engines, Kevin, and the Microsoft systems are tracking. And so say we'll talk about maybe an attack came in from identity, and it had a very specific sequence, but it's never been identified in Office. Now you can say, hey, the Defender product itself, being this comprehensive approach, is saying, I've seen this before. I've seen this sequence before. Let me actually sandbox this now before it's coming into Office 365. So I didn't mean to dominate that, but I always like talking about that portion of why I really like the Defender product.
Yeah, and when you think about numbers and the scale of what Chris is talking about, we're not talking about tens of thousands of different signals and different things happening, right? We're actually talking about trillions with a T. Mm-hmm. So last year, when we did something similar, Chris, I looked up the numbers from last year. Microsoft, on average, every single day received, in 2023 at this time, 65 trillion signals every single day. And those are the signals of attacks that are coming in throughout the world from multiple services, not just the Windows 10s and Windows 11s and so forth, but these are for all the Defender products that are out there, right? We're getting signals in on those. The Defender for Microsoft Office 365, there were 37 billion email attacks blocked last year, right? By the way, this year there's, instead of 65 trillion signals, there's 78 trillion. So we increased 13 trillion signals in 1 year,
With the
right?
T.
With a T, with a T. I mean, a lot of the security reports that we read out there from different vendors, they operate more or less in the millions. Again, we're in the trillions because of the scope of what we've got, right? When you think about Windows 10 and Windows 11, there's over 1.5 billion installations of that particular product running out there. There's when we think about Xbox Live users, Xbox Live is a huge platform, right? There's something like 80 or 90 million paying customers on that. These are all public numbers, by the way, that you'll find often in our quarterly earnings reports. There's a lot going on out there. 2.5 endpoint signals analyzed every day. We'll talk about Windows Defender for endpoints, and that's a big chunk of where we get a lot of signals from. And the trick is there, it's turned on by default, right? When you light up Windows 10 or Windows 11, that comes automatically. Microsoft has turned that on by default a couple years ago, to help protect all of the environments out there from the malicious attacks and things that people don't think about. They're just not aware of cybersecurity and all the threats that are coming at them. And unfortunately, the attackers are taking advantage of that. So by enabling that, we're protecting all the consumers out there that have this, but we're also getting in a lot of the signals for a lot of attacks that most other vendors don't ever see, right? And we analyze those signals, and to Chris's point, we look at the sequence of what's going on. Is an attack from these different IP addresses coming in, to different services here? Yes. Okay. Well, let's block those IP addresses. Let's block them, right? Protect the attack just before it before it even comes into our environment here and hits anybody, any consumer or paying subscriber. So again, that's 78 trillion signals a day that Microsoft analyzes to help protect over 200 plus different services out there that we have. Huge numbers. I've never seen anything at the scope of something like this, but yeah, we're also one of the most attacked networks in the world at the same time. So with that, Chris, I think we highlighted this and talked a little bit about Microsoft security, which we can go a lot deeper into.
Oh, yeah.
But let's hit on some of these products and see what we do with some of these, with all these different signals.
Yeah, so inside Defender for Office 365, it's not just email that is protecting. And I've dropped that poll out there, and I'm glad we sat on the slide beforehand. But, it does protect more than just email. It's doing Teams, it's doing SharePoint, it's doing the Office apps that I mentioned before. So if you're using the Office apps and you have Defender for Office 365 enabled, going back to the example that I used, how Kevin and I just shared this PowerPoint with him. If Kevin happened to have gotten compromised, or he was using it in a somewhere where it was not good, and somehow something got into the PowerPoint and now it showed up on my machine, and I have Defender for Office 365, that PowerPoint would have scrubbed it and it would have blocked it because I have that protection enabled on my application. So it's more than just email. And that's what I always tell people about if they're looking, hey, is this as good as that, or is this as good as another product? Email, yeah, absolutely. But you get that added benefit of SharePoint, Teams, your Office app. So it's taking it to that next level where you're protecting beyond just email, like that last bullet point on the slide right there.
Yep, and this is one of them too, Chris, that we kind of highlighted before, that service that Chris just talked about, that's not on by default. You have to know where that is. You have to know that it exists, right? And you have to remember too, Microsoft's a cloud provider. We don't, we can't just activate everything because we don't know what you have in your environment. If we activated everything, we could be really interfering with what you already have established from perhaps another vendor in your environment. But here's an opportunity for reducing complexity and reducing costs in the environment too, and elevating the security posture of your entire environment. So yeah, a lot there.
Yeah, and so when things do get detected, depending on the policies that you have set up, there's a lot of different kind of alerts or detailed alerts or different action flows that you can actually have happen. You can automatically quarantine, you can warn. So there's a lot of different things that you can do depending on the type of threats, because I know some of the newer things that are coming out, you can also change the threat level based on the different kind of risk as your user profile may have. So if you're considered a low risk user versus a high risk user, you could actually have different detection policies against you as well.
Yep.
And going on investigation and hunting, this was a really cool one that I stole this from another presentation that Kevin and I did. So because you can have different levels of detection and different levels of policies out there, if you're trying to figure out how it came in, why it came in, where it came in, stuff like that, the how you can analyze it and if it became a user went from a low risk to a medium risk to a high risk and in the steps that went through it. So how you can go through the logs and see how things got into the system, maybe because it was an application or a third-party app or shadow IT stuff that came in. So there's a lot of different ways with you can use the tools inside Defender itself to do this investigation and this hunting and make sure that maybe I shouldn't allow this user to bypass or use their own judgment to should they allow this to go through or not anymore.
Yeah, Chris, something else that's on this. I mean, when we look at it, and I know it's kind of small on the screen for everyone to see, but it's a nice GUI. It's a nice graphical user interface to be able to see, hey, why did an email come in? Or when an email came in, why was it blocked? What action was taken? Was it a system policy, a user policy? Could always be a user policy, right? But why? Or was it a URL that was malicious, an attachment that was malicious? So in the past, and you could still, of course, do this, you had to be really good with being able to read what we call SMTP headers. So every email that comes in, you can dive really deep into a trace and figure out exactly what happened, how the email left where it came from, and how it got in, and hit everything in between, right? Including different reason codes on why email actions were taken by different policies and so forth. But you really have to know how to read that deeply, right? And I've been doing this stuff for 25, 30 years for email, going back to like Exchange 5.5 servers and so forth. So I just know how to read that. But being able to look at it on a GUI like this, trust me, is far easier to understand what happened to the email. So you don't have to necessarily be an email expert to review this and dig deeper into it. So it makes life a lot easier as well.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I guess I didn't build that slide out. Apologies.
It's okay. Yep.
So when you talk about setting up how you can respond and remediate some things, there's a term that Microsoft has, and it's actually highlighted low on there. It's called ZAP, or 0-hour auto purge. What it'll do is it'll retroactively detect and neutralize the malicious phishing and spam and the malware messages that have already been delivered, because maybe they came through and somebody allowed it, but then another person identified this as a phishing attempt that was not initiated by your company as part of the awareness training, right?
Yep.
But an actual phishing. So a lot of people have reported that, and now your IT admins can say, okay, this email has been identified as that, and so now it can retroactively come through your organization, and it can quote unquote zap it. And I think that's a really slick feature that it's out there.
Yeah, Microsoft operates, they are the cloud vendor. They operate at the Exchange level. To do this with other products out there, you've got to install agents amongst other things to be able to do it, which certainly adds to the complexity. Those agents, you have to update those from time to time. You have to make sure that they're working correctly with the Exchange service. Whereas here, it's all built in, right?
And speaking of awareness and training, I know that they do them here, and they do them quite often, and they're very good at the ones that they do here, at least. Amy can probably attest for that as well. But they send some really good ones out. But that's built into the platform. So the security awareness training or the phishing training, that whatever term you want to use, it's into the platform. It's in part of Defender for Office 365. So you don't have to have that third-party application coming in and doing this. It is native with the platform, and you can use it for your user awareness. And you can actually get the reporting in case you need to say, hey, Sally in accounting, hopefully there's no Sally from accounting on today, but she needs to go through our security awareness training again, because she's constantly clicking the links. As one of the people in our organization said, one of his top 3 things that he likes to do is click on links. So maybe they need to go through those trainings.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing too here is something that was launched. Another feature that was included with the simulation campaigns that you can kick off in Microsoft 365 is something called a Teams phishing simulation. So, like Chris brought up earlier, he and I can communicate all the time over Teams, but we're within 2 different companies, right? Well, what if my account was compromised and the attacker that is now assuming my identity sends Chris a malicious link? Well, most of us are aware of spam and nasty links that can come through email now, but when you go to Teams, you're more trusting of the environment, right? And what's going on. We don't expect malicious links or attackers to come in that way. Well, through Teams and phishing simulation, I think it's called SPIM now, the awareness training does, you can attack your own users using Teams, and that heightens the level of awareness and brings training into light. As far as I know, Microsoft's the only vendor that offers that, and again, it's native to the environment.
We talked about a lot of different things, and I threw a little demo in here just so we can kind of see it happening in real time, and it is showing that it's on a mobile device as well, but it's pretty neat. It's just a quick little demo. It's not going to take long, and I don't think there's any audio, so I know in the past people said there's no audio, but you can just kind of see how it's going through where an email has come through. They think it's somebody that they know, and it's like it's actually not safe. So when you get to that point, and maybe it came from Patrick, but somebody, because the email said on there was from Patrick, but maybe there was the misspelling of the last name, one letter. I mean, instead of Kevin with an I, they did Kevin with an E, right? And so, hey, that's Kevin. I'm going to click on this. Oh, that's a bad link. So we protected ourselves because we wanted the Defender for Office 365 to block that link. So that's how you can kind of mitigate. The user wasn't really paying attention and got click happy, as we like to say, but we're still protecting our organization.
Yep. In this case, something slipped through, and it's always a cat and mouse game. Things will slip through, and you have to be prepared for that and have your user environment prepared for that. For a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, right? But what's cool, I think, also about this, Chris, is you're on a cell phone, and the policy, the protection, it was activated here. Right, so your cell phone is, let's say you haven't updated your cell phone for about 2 years, right? And so attackers are aware of that. They're looking for the iOS or the Android version that you have and know what vulnerabilities to take advantage of here. But this is on your cell phone, but it's also just as good as on a PC, a Mac, an Android device, whatever it may be. This applies, right? So you're protecting the entire environment and all of these different devices, which is so important, especially when you think about BYOD policies, where you may not be in control of everything depending on how your policies are set.
No, that's a good call out, because like you were mentioning before, this isn't an agent. This is done on the exchange level because that's where the mail is. So it's done on the platform level. So if something does get through one filter by mistake, you can have other protection policies to your, and I like your plan A, B, and C. So that's a good call out.
Sure.
So another one that I like to talk about a lot, and Kevin and I have actually done presentations on this too. I think we've done presentations on all these, is Defender for Identity. So while I know email is still the most highly attacked service that's out there, that's where everybody goes through because it's what everybody uses today. What they want is your identity, because if they can get your identity and they can get onto your network, then they've got the keys. Right now they can go through where they have, because Kevin has global admin in his organization, so they want Kevin's identity. So how can we protect the identity from, like, it's, you see it on here again, the miss of the configurations. If you don't have your configurations correctly, your identity is more welcomed to be compromised, right? And so that's a big one to make sure that you do, is you make sure you look at the zero trust kind of approach, right? Where you're only giving people the right amount of protections. You're only giving people the right amount of access. They're only getting them what they actually need access to. And Defender for Identity can actually help with that. And if you think about how threats can really originate from anywhere, and if they can find that identity and they can get into that system, and you don't have your identities controlled and secured correctly, then they can move through your organization.
Yep. And the next slide has a couple of examples of that as well. When we think about, and we'll just call out a few of these, right, interest of time. When we think about legacy protocols used, okay, what is that? What does that mean? And where do I find that in this massive tenant with all of these different controls in the Microsoft environment, right? So legacy protocols, thinking of one in particular, it's legacy authentication, or sometimes called basic authentication, versus modern authentication. The difference is that modern authentication, you can use MFA for that, right? The legacy or basic authentication, it's turned on by default, not anymore for new tenants, but for existing tenants that have been installed, up until about a year or two ago, I think is when we enabled it for new ones. But it's turned on by default. I have a stat here. This might be 2 or 3 years old, but it talks about spray attacks using legacy authentication protocols. 99% of all password attacks come in through this way, this method, right? Credential stuffing attacks, 97% use legacy auth. Again, remember going back to this, what was it, 70 some trillion signals that Microsoft gets every day. These are some of the signals that we see. We know attacks. We see them every day, right? I forget how many different identity attacks we receive every second. It's in the hundreds, right? But we have stats on that. But if you disable that legacy authentication protocol, 67% of your attack surface is turned off right away by doing one thing. Yeah, it's amazing. MFA, enabling that. Yeah, it's huge. There's something like 99.9% of your attack surface in that area just goes away, right, as soon as you enable it. But it's also, and I'm going to focus on this for a moment, you have to know what you're doing when you enable these, because you don't know what I almost said surface as in Microsoft Surface. You don't know what service is out there using those protocols. You have to investigate that. You have to know where the logs are. You have to look it up, and you have to migrate those services off onto a modern authentication protocol before you enable this. Same thing with MFA. You can hit the button and enable it for everybody tomorrow, but you may just lock everybody out. So it really takes some skill by someone that does this every day for different environments to enable these in a safe and methodical way.
Yeah, and that kind of sets up the next slide pretty good about, you could do a lot of things. You could just go in there and turn it on.
Yeah.
But you don't know why you're doing it, and you could do things detrimental to your company. There's a thing that's called Secure Score, and hopefully a lot of people know about Secure Score, but I do still run into people quite frequently that don't. And on this slide, I'm talking about how does IAM, or Identity Access Management, affect your Secure Score. But what Secure Score is inside the Microsoft world is it's going to look at all of the different configurations that are through the tenant that you can have turned on or turn off, and it's going to give you a score based on those. And there's also the realization that you could use a third-party app for that. And so there's an option there that says, I'm using an outside application for this, or an outside vendor for this. So if you are using MFA through another, like say Duo or Okta or whatever, and you're not using the MFA inside Intra, then you can say, I'm using a third-party app for that, and it'll help your Secure Score. So you can, it's not just, I bring that up because it's not just the security on your tenant. That's where it started, but it's how are you secure from your cloud environment. So that's what Secure Score is. And this is a screenshot from a demo tenant. So you can see it's not that great, but it's not that bad. But when you're looking at identity, because we happen to be in the Defender for Identity kind of portion of this slide, 10%, I think it was, Kevin. Come on, Bill. There we go. 10% of the controls that are in here are just identity related. So that's a big number. If you think about how many different things are in Secure Score, 10% of those are just around identity. That's a large number.
Yep. And just on that, there's some cyber insurance companies out there today that are wondering, hey, what's your Microsoft Secure Score? And boy, you better have looked this up beforehand before you want to report on that. But it's a great way to identify areas to go after to help elevate the security posture of your environment.
Yeah, I was actually working with a client. It was late last year where the same thing, like they were not going to get approved for their cybersecurity until they got the secure where the insurance provider thought it was. And so we had to go through line by line. Well, what are you doing for this? What are you doing for that? But I'm going to caution you again, just because it's saying that you need to do this, You don't need to just go in there and do it, because you could break other things. Or to Kevin's point, if you turn on MFA without doing your due diligence, you can lock out all your admin accounts too. So, I mean, you just proceed with caution, please.
Right, right. Yep. Can't stress that one enough.
Yeah. So Defender for Cloud Apps. This is also some people call it protection from shadow IT. And the term that used to be out there was Cloud Apps. It was or CASB, sorry, I almost gave it away. The Cloud Access Security Broker. That was the protection for that. It's not just looking at tenants again, right? It's looking at, to Kevin's example earlier, did you install, I'm going to pick on the easy one. Are you all of a sudden using Dropbox because you don't like our security permissions inside SharePoint? So you decided that you wanted to install Dropbox so you can get a file to somebody without going through the company's rules. What Defender for Cloud Apps can do is it can detect that you installed Dropbox on your machine, and it will let the organization know that, hey, there's an app that we've deemed that doesn't need to be in our organization on somebody's computer, and it will report on that. Yep. So, Kevin, I know this is one of your topics that you like to talk about a lot, so I'm not trying to steal your thunder.
Oh,
but
no, man, we both love this one. This is probably one of our favorite topics for discovery through an environment. Do you want to hit the next slide there, Chris?
Yeah. Yep.
This is just an example. I think, Chris, you might have covered this one. We can go to the next one here. And there's a couple of other slides here that we can hit on, just interest of time as well.
This one?
Yeah, so what's really cool is that when you go through this process, when you first fire up cloud apps, security, you can, and you make discovery. And you figure out, okay, I've got all of these. Say you're aware of like 20 different apps that are sanctioned by your local IT department. Well, I guarantee you're going to find some things that you had no idea about. You'll probably come up with a couple of hundred, to be honest with you. Yeah. But so then you can go through a chain for each one of them. And, again, being methodical, you have to go through and understand, why are these people using this, this app, whatever it is that you're not aware of, right? And is it now critical to the function of the business? So you can identify the machine, and in most cases, the person who is using those, or the people or the team, and you can go interview them. It takes a long time to go through this, right? But you don't want to interrupt your business, but at the same time, you've got to protect your business as well. But anyhow, when you go through these, you can create now, you've created your list of 20 different apps, right? And you've weeded out all the other ones, right? You can go through and say, only these 20 apps are now sanctioned by IT, and you can forcefully, and you can enforce that to happen. So you can see how it's walking you through a chain, a decision tree here, but you can do that through the GUI. That there is an example, I think, in a few more slides. Yeah, so this one here, this talks about device. It gives you, it's very small on the screen, but one of the highest bars on here is something called File Dropper, and then there's Dropbox, and there's WeTransfer. There's a couple of Google apps, Microsoft apps, and so forth. But boy, there are apps everywhere. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool is that you can figure out, okay, who's using File Dropper? Why is there 14 megs of data that's been transferred over the past 24 hours or week, whatever your time frame is set for the filter? And you can figure out why they're doing that. And then what's cool is that even neater is that you can go into File Dropper, you can click on it, and Microsoft has already classified these, right? So there's something like 90 different data points, I think, for each one of these apps. Is it SOX compliant? Is it HIPAA compliant? Is it, this certification? Is it ISO? You name it. But also, what's even more important is, where is that service hosted?
Yeah,
is it out of? Yep, thank you. I might have jumped ahead here. Sorry about that, Chris.
No worries, all good.
But you can see here that this one, it's called Mega, right? Someone clicked into it. We've got people using it. It's a cloud storage and it's headquartered out of New Zealand, with a data center in Luxembourg. All interesting. It doesn't really give me much heartburn. However, when I go down to the compliance area, I've got red X's all over the place, right? And I'm a healthcare provider, right? I have urgent healthcare centers all across the Midwestern United States, whatever it may be. Well, I'm not HIPAA compliant. This service cannot be used in my environment. Now that gives me some heartburn, and now I've got to do some more investigation. But there are, I think it was 17,000 apps that are identified and classified with all of these different data points that you can go into. It's rich data, and it's amazing what's on everybody's network. Every time we've used this, Chris, we always find a lot of data, a lot of things that are running people just have no idea about that's in their environment. So the data comes through, the signals come through a couple of different ways. One of them is just through the cloud. We get that through DNS and so forth. But the other way is through Microsoft Defender for endpoint. If you have Defender enabled and it's managed, those signals are sent to this CASB service here. So we know the IP address, we know the user, and so on and so forth. But just one other point on this, let's say you're not using the cloud very much and you just want to see, you want to check this out and see, okay, what's running on my environment? Maybe you have firewalls running, right? And you name the firewall, you dump the logs out, you export them, you upload them into this that you can get a free trial of on your tenant, and it'll parse through those logs within, what, an hour or two, depending on the size of them, and you can view this report. You know, and the best thing is you can get a 30 or 60-day free trial on it. As part of your service. This will light up everything in your environment. It's amazing at what you're going to find. I promise you that. So Chris, I beat this one. I know you love this one too. Anything else to add onto it?
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to add on, especially if you're just talking about cloud storage. So, I mean, what's one of the topics that I absolutely love to talk about, and it's Copilot, right? And it's where the data, if the data is not in your tenant, then it's, you got to create all these connectors, which means you're incurring costs because now you have to have the ingress egress to go out to, Box or whatever the other application stores might be. But if you don't know that people are using Mega in this example that we have out there to store the data, and now you try to go out there and run a Copilot search because you want to see a proposal that somebody made and you want to reference that in your Copilot search, you didn't even know that it wasn't in your tenant because it's in Mega. Right, so that's one downfall just with the new technologies. If you're letting people just store things wherever they want to store, but just think about it on the other side of it too. Say that you're compromised, and it's not necessarily a ransomware kind of compromise where they're encrypting everything, but you have somebody that they've gotten your identity. So you didn't have Defender for identity, and they're on your machine. So now the Defender for endpoint you're not using, they're starting to transfer files to Mega, because Mega is now installed on this endpoint. And so that's another protection level that data is leaving the company and you didn't even know about. So that just two examples that have kind of come up, the Copilot one more frequently recently. But when I started thinking about it with other organizations I was working with on how data is exiting the company, maybe an employee leaving. That's another one too. You want to talk about compliance and risk of a user. This is how you can help control that so they can't ship the data to Google Drive, right? It's an example, but because most people have a Gmail account and they're going to have a Google Drive account. It's just an example of how this can help.
Yep. And there's alerting on here too. You can get text alerts for anything really serious, like if some ransomware is found or something, you get texting alerts, you get email alerts. Those emails can be, or text can be sent to help desks or level 2, level 3, depending on the severity of whatever it is that you find. But there's so much in this product. It's the data that it produces is eye-opening. It's eye-popping, actually. But what it can do to help secure your environments is beyond belief. It's really something to dive into.
Yeah. So I want to go back, Kevin, when we were talking about Secure Score, somebody put in a great question and we didn't touch on it. So thanks for bringing it up. But the question was, what's the highest Secure Score you've seen? And the part that I wanted to talk about is I'm assuming 100% is really not possible. So 100% is possible, but that just means you can't get into the tenant at all because it's just locked down. So you don't want 100%.
Yeah, there's there's being perfect, but there's times not to be perfect.
Yeah, you just want to review, make sure you review your Secure Score with other individuals to make sure that you have the best practices for your organization in place, because everything that's in there may not apply to you. So there's a lot of different things that are going to be in there that apply to other organizations. Maybe you're not a financial institution and you don't need to concern yourself about all the PCI controls that are in there. So you need to learn to accept what's not applicable to your business. So I wanted to call that out because thanks for bringing that up, but I did want to call that out.
Yep, great question. We get asked that quite a bit. what should my
Yeah.
secure score be?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it depends.
Yeah, it's not you don't need to go after a score. You just need to make sure you know what's in there and get it as high as you feel comfortable getting it. But don't go and clicking them without knowing what you're doing. Saying it
Yep.
again. So Defender for Endpoint. It used to be when it first came out, when it was first kind of brought in, it was Windows Defender and it was just for Windows. But now, I mean, look at everything that it can do. It's endpoints and servers. Endpoints meaning it can be iOS, it can be Macs, it can be Linux, it can be Windows, it can be mobile, right? The two Android and iOS is on there. Virtual desktop. That's one a lot of people don't think about. Do I need to protect my virtual desktop? Well, it's a cloud PC, so the answer is going to be yes. So there's a lot of different endpoints that you can now protect. That's not just a physical laptop or desktop with a Windows operating system on there.
Yeah, and what I think is cool about this too is that when we think about Microsoft Intune, and I think about my personal or my company laptop, but on my personal, I know that doesn't show up, but my personal iPhone, right? Intune as a policy is installed on my personal iPhone, just managing the Microsoft data. But one of the policies that's in there says, hey, you must have Microsoft Defender installed. And your iOS must be at a specific level, right? So I have, every time Apple releases iOS updates for security patches or features, whatever it may be, I have something like 5 days to install them on my iPhone, or I lose access. It's that simple. You want to be able to view Microsoft data on your personal device under the BYOD policy. Okay, you can do that, but you've got to play by the rules that we've determined will help keep the Microsoft data secure, which is what ultimately we're after, is securing that data. But like Chris said, I've got an iOS device. That's what I have on my home platform, right? If I use Mac OS, same thing's going to happen. If there's Android devices out there, same thing. Those Intune policies that are requiring endpoint protection, they're just as important as everywhere else, because there's attack vectors all over the place.
Yeah, and so it's not just protecting it from the endpoint level. It's doing real-time protections like we've been talking about throughout this whole thing. It's not one of those response type initiatives. It's always there's several things it's trying to do across the gamut on what Microsoft Defender for Endpoint's doing. So there's, threat vulnerability management, attack surface reduction, next generation protection, endpoint, the EDR, the automated investigation remediation. And then if it's something that hasn't come in there, then it's going to go into the threat experts over at Microsoft. So, it's doing a gamut of things. It's not just one thing. It is doing a lot of things here.
Yep.
Let's see. I think I have some examples in here. Yeah. So network protection. So on the screen, it's showing that how you can set up some of the protections inside Defender Security Center on network, on just how it's coming through, and make sure that it's just not on the edge of the computer, but on the Microsoft edge. So customers can add their own typo IT policies in here to have to go
It
into
happens.
their. Need to have Copilot check it next time, right?
Right.
So it's just, there's a lot of things that people are used to inside these that Defender for Endpoint can do. Web threat and the web threat alert. So if you control the web kind of protection through here, instead of having the web filter, you can do it at the PC level, because if they're not through a VPN where you can have them going through your IP address to protect it, you can do this at the endpoint level as well.
Yeah, and there's something on that suspicious URL detection, right? What if you're using Edge? What if you're using Google Chrome? What if you're using Firefox or a Tor browser, right? All of that, this is controlled. This is through Microsoft Defender and the policies that are set. That's what's really cool about it. It's agnostic above that. It's protecting it at more of a base layer to protect these malicious attacks from coming in, from a URL perspective to an email perspective to everything else. So it's powerful when you think about the different attack vectors that it's covering for you on those devices.
Yeah, and if you've ever configured a web kind of filter product, you can do it by categories, right? So it's an interface you're probably familiar with. It's not like you're having to learn a new way of thinking on how you want to address web content. it's using the same methodologies as you're probably used to. I know when I was coming up through it, the company that I stayed at for a while, we had a Barracuda web filter. That's what we used. And this looks very similar how you block the categories, right? And so you can, it's not that I had to learn Defender. That's where I'm trying to get out there is you have to learn Defender, but you don't have to learn Defender. That's where I was getting out with that.
Yep. The GUI is the GUI, right? This filter, you're right. It looks like Barracuda, it looks like SonicWall, it looks like WatchGuards and Cisco's, all the major firewall vendors out there. They've got this capability. So does Microsoft, right? It's and you're probably already paying for it. In getting back to that topic, you're probably already paying for it in the license that you have. You're just not aware of it, and that's super cool to be able to reduce costs and complexity in the environment.
And the thing I want to touch on again, this is on the endpoint level, right? So you're configuring in Defender, the Defender policies are getting pushed down to the endpoint, but this is on the endpoint level. So if you're not if they're not sitting in your office or they're not VPing in, or you don't have them going through a very specific thing because they're working in an airport or in a Starbucks or in a McDonald's, wherever they're working, this is on the endpoint level, Kevin. So it's protecting the machine at the endpoint, which is where most people want access to, because if they have access to the endpoint, then they're going to get access to your identity.
Right. Most malicious attacks do not go to the front door of Citibank.com. Right. It's too heavily fortified. They're going to the users, and once they're in the user environment, that's where they can start to move laterally, and then out from there to other users in your environment, and so on and so forth, and attack through multitude of different ways. Looking for those different personas, maybe someone with financial control that can issue money orders or bank transfers or anything like that. That's how they're making money. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. So what we're saying is defense in depth, right? You're not saying it, but you are saying it. And so if you have the E5, the 4 that we talked about today, you have them, right? So you already have a defense in depth strategy because you already have the 4 products that we talked about. So just today alone, and remember there was over 20, but you have those. And if you have the E3, then you have 2, maybe even 3 of them, depending if you have any add-ons. So make sure that you're using it with how you should be using it to make sure that you're doing all the defense in depth that you can, because like I said, the endpoint goes into the identity, which now comes into the data, which now goes outside of the organization. And that's what you don't want to lose. So Kevin, I know like we ran through some at the end, and we always run out of time on this one.
We did pretty good. We were able to go into most of them. Yeah. We might have skipped 1 or 2, but no, you did a great job this time.
But you're probably thinking you covered a lot. And I don't know if I'm able to do any of this stuff because you talked about a lot of stuff, or maybe I don't have the right licenses. I can help you today. We can look at what license sets that you have today. We can analyze it to see maybe we need to add on something, or maybe you're already double dipping and we just need to configure it. You want to dive in deeper and you want to figure out what all you can do with Microsoft security. Well, they've got a lot of workshops, and I can deliver all those workshops that they have out there as well. We have security assessment offerings here at A&M. And if you just want somebody to look over your shoulder while you're doing a secure score review, hey, give me a call, Microsoft@anm.com, and we can definitely help you out with that. So I just dropped the poll out there, even though we do have the next one already scheduled. May 16th, we are going to be talking about 365 Copilot. Can it really do that, Kevin? We're actually going to show people that it can do it, because Kevin is going to get his demo tenant live. He got it live. He's going to expose it to everybody and be thinking of some things that you want to see Copilot do. Maybe we'll do it live. Maybe we'll say, hey, can you analyze that table and bold out anything that's over X, Y, and Z? Kevin can show it to you in real time. So be thinking on that. Come join us May 16th. Let me drop the registration link in the chat. Where did it go? There it is. Let me, we're going to be using a new platform. So make sure that you register for that. And come on. There we go.
And Copilot is truly amazing. That'll be a neat demo to go through. I love doing that. I love showing it off. And, you can ask me some questions that I'll be like, well, I don't know, but let's try it, because I'll learn something new at the same time. It's just that limitless as far as what it can do. Huge adoption for it. It's just every day it seems like it's saving me more and more time. And I can go deeper into that during that presentation.
Yeah, but if you guys have any questions, put the email address up there again, microsoft@anm.com. Please feel free to use it. It's going to come to me and my team, and we will make sure that we get the appropriate person to answer the question for you. Kevin, I want to thank you as always for coming out and doing this with me. I know that today's schedule was a little tight, but I appreciate it.
You bet.
Always a lot of fun to do this. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks as always, Chris, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Yeah, and we will be sending this this recording out, I think 24 to 48 hours, and Amy's been sending out the slides as well. So I'll make sure that she gets all these slides. So everybody, thanks. Make sure you register, and we will see you next time. Take care, guys.